Okay, welcome back to our last shiur. This is our 13th shiur on Hilchot Pesach. So, to all those who have been with us the whole journey, Hazak Baruch, I hope we've been able to understand some of the aspects of Pesach a bit better. I said last week, today we're going to finish Hagalat Kelim and go through some practical examples. However, I decided not to do that, simply because I dedicated the daily halakha this week and last to it and went through many appliances. And so I felt that would be more appropriate and beneficial for us to go through the halachot of the Seder. We did this a number of years ago, but of course we always need to refresh ourselves and go over the main points, and that's why we're going to today begin with Siman 471. I've posted in the chat box the link to it. Okay, and like this, we'll go through the main halachot of the Seder, which are relevant, and we're not going to learn it like we know, like everything like we normally do. We'll go pick up the main points, and like that, we'll have a refresher of the points of the Seder next Motzei Shabbat B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so let's quickly see Taf Ayin Aleph 471. I've posted the link on the group. Okay, this talks about Erev Pesach in the afternoon. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Asur le'echol pat mish'ah asirit u'lemala k'dei she'ochal matzah le'te'avon. It's forbidden to have bread or matzah from the 10th hour, i.e. 2 hours before sunset. It'll be about 5 o'clock this year, in order that we have the matzah with appetite. Now, this is even, as we explained some weeks ago, that for Sudah Shilishit you can have matzah, soaked matzah, i.e. in soup, in hot water, boiled, or for that matter, frying it. But you can't do that from the 10th hour. So you have to ensure Sudah Shilishit, if you're having matzah, or matzah shira, has to be consumed by around 5 o'clock or so in England. Avalochel mat perot yerakot. You can, however, from that time eat a bit of fruit, a bit of vegetables, but don't eat too much. And if you are a person who gets full up very easily, then you have to ensure that you eat very little. Says the Shulchan Aruch, "V'yayin ma'at lo yishteh mishum demisat tzayid." You shouldn't even have a bit of wine. Okay. But he says, "Halacha bet v'kodem sha'a sirit mutar le'chol matzah ashira." But you can have matzah ashira. Even though you're not allowed to eat matzah on the Erev Pesach, you can have matzah ashira on Erev Pesach all the way through till the 10th hour to 2 hours before Pesach. But says the Rama, aval matzah sheyotzim ba balayla asurim le'echol kol yom arba'a asar. Matzah, which a person will be able to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah with, it's forbidden to eat the entire day of the 14th. What does that mean, the entire day of the 14th? The Mishnah Berurah rules, this means from the morning. This is a common misconception. People think that you're not allowed to have matzah all 24 hours before, and therefore on Friday night this year you're going to have to have hametz or something. No, it's not correct that. You're allowed to, there's actually 3 opinions in the Rishonim. The Gemara says you're not allowed to have matzah on Erev Pesach. What does Erev Pesach mean? One opinion was all 24 hours before. That was the minority opinion. Another opinion said that it's from the morning. And the third opinion, that was the Rambam, from the morning. And the Rosh held from midday. Okay, and the Shulchan Aruch takes the middle option, which is from midday, from the morning, it's forbidden. And therefore, on Friday night this year, a person is allowed to have matzot, regular matzot, and say, Motzi lechem min haaretz, and have his Su'udot Shabbat on Friday night from that. That's absolutely fine. Only in the morning we have the whole issue of, what kind of food to use as to do the Hamotzi. Okay. Next, continues the Rama. V'katan she'eno yodea ma she'msaprim balayla mitzad nisayim mutar la'achilo. A child, you're allowed to give him to eat. I mean, there's not a lot of food to eat on Erev Pesach. There's no bread. If you can't have matzah, what's the child going to eat? So you can give the child, a young child, you can give him matzah. Now, there's an interesting halakha with regards to this, which the poskim writes, and that is that although regular matzah, for this year specifically, when Shabbat falls on Erev Pesach. So although regular matzah isn't muktzeh, because that matzah, although we're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, but we can give it to children, it's got a use to it. But you would never give matzah shmura, the expensive matzah, or the matzah which you've designated and set aside for the Seder night, for the mitzvah, you would never give that to a child. You would give him non-matzah shmura. So the poskim write that matzah on Shabbat, when it falls on Erev Pesach, is actually muktzeh. The matzah which is designated and set aside for Pesach night should not be moved. What's the practical nafkamina ramification of this? I'll tell you. This year, many people have been asking, can we do the Seder, can we start the Seder slightly earlier? Or, for that matter, even if we can't start the Seder slightly earlier, can we prepare the table? So what's the issues here? Let's just speak out the problem here. And let's talk about London. London night falls about 20 to 9, 8:40. Now, okay, certainly, as we will learn in the next Siman, one should start the Seder after 8:40, start Kadesh then. That's certainly the best and preferred and correct practice. But if I'm only beginning to set the table at 8:40, and that means, because it's Shabbat, now you can't prepare from Shabbat to the next day, so I have to wait till 8:40 to prepare. So if you've got a small family and you've got the ability to do that, great, do that. But if I've got lots of guests, or I've got children who won't be able to stay up so long, and so I want to set the table already on Shabbat to prepare for after Shabbat, so that straight after on I get home from synagogue at 8:40 I can begin Kaddish, and I won't have to, like in a regular year, we come home, we're ready, 8:40, the right time we begin. As opposed to having to come home, get the table ready, get the cutlery, the plates, the matzot, the maror, the seder plates, so on and so forth. It takes a long time putting this all together. It can take 20 minutes, half an hour. If you've got lots of guests, it can take even longer. So can you prepare before? The answer is you cannot prepare on Shabbat for after Shabbat. And therefore, until 7:52, it will be asur to prepare. However, we have a principle that it's permissible to do something which is forbidden rabbinically, ben hashmashot, i.e. from sunset to nightfall, if it's for l'tzorich mitzvah, for mitzvah purpose. And thus, here the preparation from Shabbat to Yom Tov is forbidden rabbinically. And it's being done during this period ben hashmashot, during twilight. And so, if there is a tzorich mitzvah involved, i.e. if there are lots of people and it's going to be very difficult to be able to cater for everyone, etc., then it would be permissible to set the table and prepare already from sunset for after Shabbat. Even though you're preparing, and you're preparing from Shabbat to Pesach, which normally is forbidden because Shabbat is always the highest level of holiness, so you're preparing from Shabbat to Chol, in inverted commas, nonetheless it's mutar to do so. If it's being done ben hashmashot, and it's being done at tzorich mitzvah. Now, what does tzorich mitzvah mean? Each person needs to determine themselves what tzorich mitzvah means. If you feel that having the children up so late and they're not going to be able to participate fully, if we're going to have to wait from after 8:40 to begin setting the table, okay, then that's that. Then each person has to determine themselves. Certainly, if you've got lots of guests, and think about it, setting the table at such a time can take a long time. So then certainly I think one can be lenient. But even if it's a small gathering, but a person feels that this is the correct practice, this is the mitzvah for them, that they begin on time so that they will engage more people and have better participation, arguably one could say that's a tzorich mitzvah. As I said, each person needs to determine themselves what the mitzvah is. But then it would be permissible to prepare on Shabbat this year, from Shkia, from 7:52 here in London, all the way through until the people come home from Bet Knesset, and then you can start the Seder straight away at 8:40. However, that only is if you are doing things which are only asur because of hachana, because of preparation. You cannot, this is where you have to be very careful with this Pesach. And if you're going to do this, you have to be very vigilant that you're only doing things which are permissible to be moved and to be moved around on Shabbat. So you cannot prepare the Havdalah candle, even though it's ben hashmashot, for after Shabbat, because that's muktzeh, that's an intrinsic prohibition. No one allows you to move muktzeh even ben hashmashot, right? So therefore, that would be permissible. Similarly, since we've said that matzah shmura, i.e. the matzah designated for the Seder night, is muktzeh on Shabbat, as opposed to regular matzah, because as we've just learned, you can feed the children matzah on Erev Pesach. So regular matzah is not muktzeh. But matzah which a person has set aside, which is the expensive matzah for the Seder night, that's muktzeh on Shabbat. And therefore to move that, and to prepare, the matzot, the 3 matzot, to prepare them, that would not be permissible until nightfall. So you can set the table, you can do the cutlery, you can put the Seder plate out, and so on and so forth. You can even prepare, pour the cups and prepare the cups, etc. But you will not be able to move of course, the Havdalah, any fire, or for that matter, even the matzah shmura designated for the night would not be permissible to be able to be moved. Now, someone asked me once when I said this, what happens if there are some people, Anshe Ma'aseh and Hasidim, who only have matzah shmura the entire Pesach, all 7 days? Okay, where that's necessary now is a different question. Again, I've talked about this in the past as well. You should know that even regular rekusans matzah, just people should know if they're ever stuck. I've actually verified this with rekusans. They won't publicize this, but the fact is that regular rekusans matzah is basically matzah shmura. Okay, the 99p, maybe they're not 99p anymore, but what they used to be 99p a few years ago, the red rekuzan matzot are actually matzah shmura, push come to shove. I'm not going to go into why. We don't go into it now. Why? But that is, you should know if you're ever stuck that you can be yotzeh the mitzvah of matzah shmura with regular matzah in vast amounts of scenarios, because the person who runs I'll just tell you very quickly, the person who runs the Rekuzans matzah told me that they always do all matzah which they make. They always say it's a Shem mitzvat matzah, because they know that so many people don't buy matzah shmura and they buy regular matzah, and so they actually do it for that. The expensive matzah which you buy, the £30, £35, those boxes of matzot, there's 2 advantages of them. One advantage is it's hand-baked as opposed to machine-baked, although we really hold that machine-baked is fine. And secondly, the advantage is that the wheat is already guarded from the time of harvesting, as opposed to from the time of grinding, which is how most regular matzot are. The wheat is guarded from the time of guarding. Okay, from the time of grinding, I mean. But the meikar hadin, you only need matzah shmura mishat tehina, from the time of grinding. So this is why regular matzot are fine. So if a person has, coming back to the question, if a person has regular matzot, a person has matzah shmura, the whole Pesach, would that be muktzeh? I'm not sure about that, because then your matzah is all the same. The whole Pesach round, your matzah is all the same. But for most of us, we're particular to have special matzah shmura already on the Seder night, so that is muktzeh this year on Erev Shabbat. And therefore, if you are preparing the table after Shkia, as we've explained, you would not be permissible to prepare the matzot or the Havdalah for Saturday night. Okay? Good? Is that clear? Any questions on that? Let's move on now to Taf Ayin Bet 472. Okay? 472. שולחן ערוך. דיני הסבא וארבע כוסות ובו תזין סעיפים. יש שולחנו ערוך מבעוד יום כדי לאכול מיד כשתחשך. You should set your table in advance. We've just talked about that. Now you can't set your table on Erev Shabbat, certainly on Shabbat afternoon, and we've explained, if necessary, it is permissible to do so from sunset. ואף בית המדרש יקום מפני שמצווה למהר ולאכול בשביל התינוקות שלא ישנו, אבל לא יאמר קידוש עד שתחשך. There's a few points here. Firstly, he says, even if you have a shiur in the synagogue or you're studying in the Beit HaMikdash, it's the wrong time to study. You need to now go home and you need to start as soon as possible. Don't delay. Why? Because the Shulchan Aruch writes, mitzvah lemaher vele'echol b'shvil hatinokot shelo yishnu. There's a mitzvah to go quickly and to eat so the children won't fall asleep and won't be engaged. So there's a discussion here what this word lemaher vele'echol, what's the importance of being vigilant and coming home quickly and beginning quickly? They explain here is to mean that you begin and you're able to get through the whole Haggadah until the eating bit. Okay, that's one explanation. Or another explanation is whatever. The point is that we need to keep the children engaged, and therefore don't delay. And so this is why you shouldn't be hanging around in Bet Knesset when you finish Arvit. You move on and you go home and you begin straight away. And of course not to delay things so that everyone can participate. But lo yomar kiddush ad shetehshach. You should only say kiddush until it's nightfall, which, as we said in London, is about 8:40. Now, there's a couple of points here. Firstly, why is this the case? On Shabbat, in the summer now, the clocks have changed. We will regularly be doing Kiddush long before it's nightfall. So there we do so because we Mosif Mehol al HaKodesh. We add on from the weekday to Shabbat, and by doing so, you can do Kiddush early, and that's absolutely fine. Lecha Tehillah, you can do that. But you should say the same with Chag as well. We should be able to bring in Pesach early and to be able to add. So, firstly, is that's true, but matzah has to be eaten at night, because the Gemara says Erev tochlu matzot. It has to be done at nightfall. And since the matzah, so why can't I start the Seder and get to motzi matzah at nightfall? Because you have to say the Haggadah at the same time when the matzot, there's an obligation to eat the matzot, and therefore the Haggadah also has to be recited after nightfall. So you can't begin Magid really before nightfall. However, Kiddush, why can't I begin Kiddush before? So here the Poskim write, because there's a mitzvah of Arba Kosot. Aside from mitzvah of Kiddush, where I can add Mehol al HaKodesh, there's also the individual mitzvah for the Kos of Kiddush. And that, or the 4 Kosot. Aside from the Kos Kiddush, there's the 4 Kosot. And those 4 Kosot need to be done at nighttime, which is why Lecha Techila, we say do it at nightfall. However, Hamadia does write, and many other poskim write this, especially in places in the northern hemisphere, places like here, on a regular year, it is permissible to start already from sunset if it's late. Like if this year would fall not on a Shabbat, this timing, I think we can agree is quite late. And so you can begin already Kiddush from sunset, as long as you don't start Manishtana before nightfall. In extreme circumstances, for example, a care home, there's a problem with care homes, people who can't stay up so late, then you can do even the Haggadah, you just leave one bit of the Haggadah for after nightfall and do matzah after nightfall. But the matzah really has to be done after nightfall. And if even that's not possible, then you have to discuss it and work out a way of doing it. Obviously, it's better to eat after sunset than eating no matzah at all, but it's in extreme circumstances. But really, this year we have the additional problem. The additional problem this year that it's going to be quite hard to start from before nightfall, because you have to do Havdalah. Now, true, the halacha is, we learned this in Ilchot Shabbat some years ago, that you can do Havdalah already from before Shabbat ending. I know it sounds strange, but just like we can do Kiddush before Shabbat comes in, we can do Kiddush on the weekday to bring in Shabbat, so too you can do Havdalah already from Plag HaMincha. You can do Havdalah as it's the time when Shabbat is beginning to go out. Now, we don't do this in practice unless there are extenuating circumstances. I'll tell you where it is relevant to this halacha. Bar Minan, a person who has lost a loved one on Shabbat, lost a relative on Shabbat. So straight after Shabbat, that person who's lost the relative, when I say relative, I mean one of the 7 siblings you mourn for, then that person will become onen straight after Shabbat, which means he can't do any mitzvot until he's buried his sibling, father, mother, son, daughter, or spouse. So you can't do any mitzvah, so you can't do Havdalah as well. On Shabbat, you can, let's say someone dies on Shabbat morning. So on Shabbat, you can still do the mitzvot of Shabbat, because there's no aninut on Shabbat. So, but straight after Shabbat finishes, you cannot do any mitzvot. It's forbidden to do mitzvot. You can't say any brachot until after you've buried the person. So here the poskim write, here would be an appropriate time that you do Havdalah from Plag HaMincha, because it's still Shabbat, you can do the mitzvah of Havdalah. In any case, the point is, you can do Havdalah from Plaga Mincha. As I said, we don't do so unless it's necessary, but you can. But the reason why you shouldn't really do that this year is because of the problem of you have to do Kiddush with the candle. One option is you leave that out and do it after. You begin the Seder before Shabbat ends, and you do Kiddush, and you say Hamavdil ben Kodesh le Kodesh, but you leave out the Ner. Or if you still have a candle, which if you still have a Ner, then you can, and the Ner is there, you don't have to move it, then you can say the Baracha on the Ner, and like that you do Havdalah even before Shabbat terminates. Remember, with Havdalah, as opposed to Hadlakat Nerot on Shabbat, you cannot do Boreh Moreh Ha'esh on electricity. We do hold you can say Boreh Ladlik Ner Shabbat on electricity, but you cannot do so on Havdalah candle, because Havdalah candle has to be a naked flame. And since electricity, you have, of course, the light and the whole the glass. That's forbidden. You cannot do the bracha on that. So, technically speaking, there are ways of being able to start this year Kiddush even before Shabbat terminates. It's not advisable unless there's a need to do so, in which you should consult rabbinical authority to work through exactly how to do it. But in brief, what will come out is, as we've said, you pray. And finish Arvit enough time to be able to walk home and get home and begin the Seder straight away, or if you need to prepare a bit, to begin straight after that. But the point is not to diddy around and hang around. Okay? Good. Sif Bet. You should have your best dishes out. And you should prepare the place where you're sitting, and you're able to recline and enjoy aristocracy for the Seder. So 2 points here. First, this is just an interesting thing. The Mishnah Berurah says here, he quotes the Maharil. The Maharil was from Germany, from about the 14th century, on this halakha that you should have your best utensils. Says the Maharil used to have lots of debtors. So this is, as we know, Jews weren't allowed into many professions, and a common profession for Jews in Europe, especially in medieval times, were to be money changers or to be money lenders. And the Maharil obviously was a good money lender. He had the collaterals of non-Jews. He was holding collaterals of non-Jews, beautiful utensils, as waiting for his loan to be paid back, and he wouldn't use them during the year, but he would use them on Pesach night. Okay, so that's just an interesting thing. As we know, in York, in 1190 in York, of course, there was a great massacre in York, and that was because the non-Jews owed the Jews so much money. So the best way, instead of defaulting on your debt, an easier way is just to kill the person who you owe the money to. So that's what happened. That's why lots of the pogroms happened in medieval times, because of the money which Jews were lending, and so they were owed money. So easier way dealing with paying back the Jews is just to kill them. In any case, that's that. And also, I want to point out that that the Shulchan Aruch, he's going to talk about the laws of reclining now, not in conjunction with any specific mitzvah, such as eating the matzah or drinking the wine. The Shulchan Aruch says very clearly later on that Yesef kol ha-seudah, really a person should be reclining, not just at the specific times like the eating of the matzah and the drinking of the 4 cups, but really a person should be in a mode of reclining the entire night. Now, in practice, we don't do that so much, because nowadays our culture has changed, and we don't. But the point is that certainly a person should feel comfortable, reclined, and in a good position the entire night, not just when he's eating the matzah and the 4 kosot. The person needs to feel comfortable. And so prepare your place so you've got enough space that you're able to look after yourself and feel good the entire evening. Okay. Gimel. כשהוא מסב לא יטה על גבו ולא על פניו ולא על ימינו אלא על שמאלו ואין חילוק בין איתר לאחר. Okay, so here again this is from the Mishnah. Mishnah tells us that when you recline, you don't recline backwards, okay, because that's not called, just sitting back is not considered a mode of aristocracy. Neither do you recline al panav, forward, or that also means, another interpretation is al panav like this. So here the poskim write, it's like you look like people who lie on their hands, it looks like you're worried, kedoeg. Maybe that was in those days. You're not meant to lean like this on yourself. But rather you lean to your side. And what does to your side mean? You lean on your left side. Why not on a person's right side? So here two reasons are given. One reason is given is because of you need to be because if you lean on the right, then the food can get trapped. Where leaning on the left is better. And also because you need to be eating with your right hand, because you're using, if you're reclining your right, you're eating with your right hand, so it's harder, you can't really eat and lean at the same time. This is why we recline towards the left. And even a left-handed person still reclines to the left. Yeah. So what's the difference between these two reasons? The difference is if you're a left-handed person, you're eating with your left hand. Still we say to lean to your left, because the reason of the potential danger involved in eating is greater than the other point. And therefore we always say you lean to the left, because hamira sakanta misura. Okay, now we come to, yes,
Sam?
Doron. Yeah.
All this leaning, is it not more the leaning of like the old times, like on couches? If I lean on my chair right now to left, I'm uncomfortable, and it would make my Seder worse, So,
okay.
How should we?
Very good point. Let's do halacha dalet and we'll come back to that. Okay. Isha eina tzricha haseba ela im ken hi hashuva. This is straight out from the Mishnah. Okay, this is not something debatable. This is something which is clear in the Talmud, that a woman doesn't need to lean unless she is a prominent individual. So what's the reason for this? Because there's two reasons given. Firstly, probably an old-fashioned reason is emat ba'ala. It wasn't common for women to recline in those days because she had the fear of her husband, meaning, okay, as I said, this is more in the olden days, a woman would sit in front of their husbands with some kind of trepidation. And secondly, this just wasn't the derech of a woman to lean, for whatever reason. And so the Mishnah says, unless you're an important person, Isha Hashuva, only then you lean. Says the Rama, but our women are considered important. So let's explain what happened here and actually how the tables were turned. So according to the Shulchan Aruch, what comes out is a regular woman doesn't need to lean at any point during the night, only if she is considered a prominent person who regularly dines and with aristocracy, and then that's normal for them. So then they would recline. That's what would come. So it would mean our woman, our Sfaradi woman, wouldn't recline. The Rama says, quoting the Ashkenazi Rishonim, this is originating in Europe, that our women nowadays are hashubot, and therefore we have to lean, and therefore men and women need to lean. So what would come out if we stop there is that Sfaradi women don't lean, and Ashkenazi women do lean. The exact opposite happens today. Why? Because the Rama continues and he says, because of the Raviyah. Who is the Raviyah? The Raviyah is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yoel, who wrote a book called Aviyah, yeah? And he was from Germany, from the 12th century, and he said, look, exactly what Doron said, is that this whole concept of reclining was only in the olden days. because that was their culture. They sat on couches when they ate, like the Romans did, and of course the Talmud was written around the Roman times, and this was the predominant culture, how people would eat and drink. And so that's why the Hachamim were so particular about doing so. But nowadays, there's no herut, there's no freedom involved in doing so, because that's not the way we eat and drink. Now, none of the Sfaradi Rishonim wrote anything of the sort, and the Rambam codified all the laws of Haseba for reclining, because obviously I think that was still it'll be interesting to check this historically, probably this was still the way people ate, and in fact, they definitely did actually, because I'll tell you what, they definitely did eat that way, because the poskim on this Siman, the Ashkenazi poskim, talk about the Jews in Artsot HaMizrach, in the eastern countries, who eat like this the whole year round. So that even in the 300-400 years ago, it was still common practice for Eastern people to be eating, reclining, and sitting, not like we do nowadays on a table and chair. You would sit on the couch, you would eat on the couch, and so on. So it comes along the Raviyah already in Europe, where this was no longer the predominant culture of eating lying down or eating on the floor. And so he says, nowadays you don't do this anymore. And so says the Ramah, the halacha is that although all our women today are considered important, but because of that opinion, we don't make them lean. And therefore, when you go to Ashkenazi Seder, the men will recline, the women will not recline. Why? The Rishonim said that their women are important. Yes, they are. But for the women, we rely on the opinion which says they don't need to lean. No one needs to lean nowadays because it's not the way of aristocracy. However, for the Sfaradim, in this point we lagged behind our Ashkenazi brethren, and the Knesset HaGedolah, Rav Ben Venisti, and others already 300-400 years ago were writing that our women are Hashuvot. Right? The Ashkenazim wrote this already in the 12th, 13th century, the Rabbi Hillel ben Mordechai, and others wrote this concept, but amongst the Sfaradim it took longer, but then it became accepted that our women are Hashuvot, and therefore the Sfaradim do lean. And the Sfaradim never took the Avi Ezri into account. They never took the Raviyah into account. And so what happened is the exact opposite to what's written in Shulchan Aruch happens nowadays. Is that the Ashkenazi women do not lean. Despite the fact that Ramah said that all our women are important, they don't lean because they rely on the opinion that you don't need to lean at all nowadays, anyone. And the Shulchan Aruch, although he said only important women need to lean nowadays, all our women are considered important, therefore we insist that men and women, for the Sfaradim, recline. Okay, so that's what comes out, how the things are different. So you go to Sfaradi Seder, the women do recline, Ashkenazi Seder, the women don't. Now, Doron does raise a very important point, which is, surely what's the whole point of this reclining? The whole point of this is derech herut. It's a way of aristocrats and to feel the freedom. When you lean nowadays, it's a whole. Sometimes it can be a whole exercise trying to get into the right position. See, the Or Letzion, B'tzon Abba Shaul, he talks about how many degrees you have to lean to. Okay, 90 degrees. And what happens if you're leaning on someone else, and so on and so forth. So that's a very fair point. And the answer to that, I would say, is something we've talked about in the past, is the fossilization of Torah and Halakha, because we don't have a Sanhedrin really. If there was a Sanhedrin around nowadays, I'm certain that they would say, scrap this whole reclining business. It's not necessary anymore. It's not the way we eat. We would think of getting nice cushions or nice comfortable like office chairs, something like that where you can recline on. A nice office chair, which I've got one now. I'm just sitting back and reclining on it. This is something nice to sit back and eat on. Like this. Exactly like I'm doing now. So that would make more sense. But the problem is that it's a din of the Gemara. Only the Raviyah was brave enough to say this in the 13th century. No one else said it because it wasn't yet so unnormal to not to recline anymore. It took time. But nowadays it's completely normal. Nobody eats like that anymore, seemingly. And so it wouldn't make sense to do it. But the problem is, we're stuck with what the Hachamim tell us in the Talmud, and there's not much you can do that. Not much you can do about that. Now, you could make a further argument and say, Tazil batar tama, go after the reason. Chazal didn't say you have to recline. Chazal said you have to enjoy yourself. And the mode of enjoying yourself is through reclining. So, if I don't enjoy myself, I find another way of doing that. I hear the argument, which is why I'm never too particular with people if they don't recline properly. If I tell them, feel comfortable, get into the position where you can enjoy the mitzvah of eating the matzah and of eating the wine, etc. That's the most important, to be able to fulfill the mitzvah correctly and properly. So that's the answer to your question, Doron. Yes, it's a problem, but there's not much we can do about it unless you're willing to say that Chazal weren't particular about Chazal themselves. Not that we're saying Chazal themselves weren't particular about it, and all they want, this was an example they gave. Then you could say perhaps, but only the Raviyah said that. So yeah, which is why
even for art, there's a way to lean back and left. Like just leaning directly to your left is more like, that's like oblique. Just like turning left is not like a comfortable thing. It's like your back to your left is like, it's not necessarily like you can find a bit of comfort per
correct.
se.
So you see people just going like this, and like that's ridiculous. Right. That's a waste of time. You have to be leaning back on something towards your left to be able to do it.
How about you lean on the couch?
Well, that would be the best. That would be the best, Marie, to do a Seder. Everyone has their couch. And that would be the best. 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to have many couches.
Yeah, everyone needs that's the problem.
Couch, divan, and people lie everywhere.
Yeah.
And then they take food and they eat like that.
Correct.
On the table.
Correct. That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And that was the whole point that you're meant to. And this is why the whole idea was, it was the whole meal. It was the whole night. Because it wasn't just nowadays, because it's become so awkward to lean, so it's become limited to, you lean at the 4 cups, you lean at the matzah, you lean at afikomin, right? Because it's awkward to do so. But really, it used to be the whole, these were the highlights where you had to, but really it was the whole night you're meant to be leaning, the whole experience of sitting back on the sofa and doing that. If we could reenact that, if you have the space, you have the couches, you have the ability to do that, 100% that's the best to do.
I agree. A low table, like a coffee table.
Yes.
Put all the food on a low table and you lean on the couches.
Okay, let's do that next year. We'll organize it in the synagogue.
It's fine. We still have time.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Good, which is why, by the way, just to say one more point, is that in the Shulchan Aruch later on says very clearly that if you did any of the mitzvot which you have to do with reclining, you didn't recline, you have to repeat the mitzvah. Which can even mean you have to go back the whole Seder. Because another halakha is you can't drink the 4 cups shelok Seder. The 4 cups have to be drunk at the appropriate times with the Haggadah in between. So technically speaking, if I got through the whole Seder and then I realized I never reclined or you didn't do it properly, you learned this halakha, you have to lean to 90 degrees, you need to 45 degrees. And so then, you have to go and do it all over again. Okay? Now, the Shulchan Aruch rules that. In practice, many of the poskim say, B'di avad, you can rely on the Raviyah and you don't have to go back. And, that's what I would say as well, if this was a practical question. That, you could rely on, as long as you were comfortable and felt good throughout and you get a cushion, feel good, relax, sit back, that would be sufficient rather than doing so. Yes, Robert? Did you want to say something, Robert?
No, sorry, no question. Apologies.
Okay. So, next. Assuming we're sitting on our couches and we're reclining properly, or our hasaba nowadays, now, again, all of this now makes sense, the next few halachot. So, for example, halakha is that a son by his father doesn't need to ask permission to be able to recline in front of them. But if you're having your Seder with your Rav, you need to ask him permission to be able to recline. Why? Because it's disrespectful to sit in front of your Rav like that. Now again, this makes much more sense. If we're just sitting back like this, is that disrespectful? Okay. If we're sitting back on the couch and flat, completely back and everything, that's not kavod. You don't sit in front of your Rav like that. So you would have to actually ask permission from your Rav, can I do hasaba? Okay, nowadays, as we say, although it's not we do like leaning back, still, It's the halacha is the person should ask their Rav if they're eating together with their Rav, if they have permission to be able to do to recline in their presence. It's actually asur. The Mishnah, the poskim write it's asur to recline without asking permission from them.
Can I ask a quick question on that at this point?
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
So theoretically, if the Rav didn't want to give permission, would the right thing to do to leave the room and have the kos somewhere else, or would it be to have a kos?
No, that's not kavod.
Without a reclining?
That's not kavod to leave your Rav. What do you mean? The answer would be that you don't have
I'm
to
saying if reclining is ma'akev, then...
No, it's ma'akev. It's ma'akev when you need to do it. Hey, you don't need to do it because your Rav hasn't given you permission.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be wrong to leave. What do you mean? He's every right. If that Rav felt he needed to teach the Talmid the lesson, to teach him a bit more about having more kavod for his teacher, and he felt he didn't want to give permission to that specific Talmid, then he should stay and not leave, and that's fine for him. He doesn't need to go back anything because halacha for him doesn't need to. Yeah. Okay, let's go to het now. Halacha het. Sorry, halacha tet. Let's go to tet. This is important because it's different to a regular Friday night. Shi'ur hakos revi'it lahar shimzegenu v'yishteh kulo or rubo. How much you need to drink for each of the arba kosot? You need to drink all of it or the majority of it. What does this mean, all of it, the majority of it? The wording is very vague, but basically all the poskim explain this to mean that kulo means you drink it, you should in the first instance be drinking the whole revi'it, or, if you really can't, you drink the majority of the revi'it. So he's talking about a cup. The Shulchan Aruch is talking about a cup which has exactly a revi'it. A revi'it is, for all intents and purposes, we take on 86 milliliters. So you really need to be drinking that whole cup, 86 milliliters, i.e., we always need to be drinking 86 milliliters for each of the 4 cups. If you can't, you find it difficult, b'di'avad, you can do it with melol ugmav, with the majority of it, which is a cheekful, which is about 44 milliliters, dependent on the individual person. Melol ugmav is subjective, it's each person's cheekful. If you're a broader person, it's going to be slightly more. If you're a very thin person, it'll be slightly less. It'll be around 44 milliliters. Now, this is in contradistinction to Kiddush. Kiddush on Friday night, you only need to drink melol ugmav. Lechat tehila, you need to drink melol ugmav. It's absolutely fine. Melol ugmav, 44 milliliters, it's fine on Friday night. Because that's enough for the Kiddush to be chal upon. However, the kos of Pesach is not just about that, it's about experiencing the herut. And here the Hachamim felt that the appropriate way to experience full herut is to be able to drink a full revi'it. Doron, you think about it, you can ask your question here as well. That in those days, wine was something which nowadays to an extent, I don't think as much. You see in Chazal, the wine was like something, it was like a whole pleasure, which is why, for example, you don't have to have wine during the 9 days and all of that. Meat, people get, no meat, they find all kinds of ways of having meat, they find that difficult. But meat's still the same delicacy as nowadays as it is in those days. But not having wine, it's not the end of the world. You get... So wine was something very important in those days. It was a particular delicacy. And so also here as well, the experience herod. Now many people will tell you they don't like it. I've seen people at the Seder, because there is a halacha that it's good to have wine as opposed to grape juice, so that it's non-mevushal because of the Rambam. We'll come to that in a second. Because there is some kind of preference to have wine over grape juice. I've seen this in the Seder, like forcing themselves to drink wine, which they're not really enjoying at all, and they feel drowsy from it after, to be able to fulfill this halakha of drinking the arba kosot. It's the same problem. Nowadays perhaps that would be changed to, whatever it may be. Many people would tell you to change it to 4 cups of Coca-Cola rather than 4 cups of wine. My point is that this is how the Hachamim established it, and we're stuck with it, really, and we follow what they've said. Now, in terms of so I'll come to the mivushal in a second, the grape juice and wine in a second. Now, you meant to drink, in the first instance, revi'it, if not, melol ugmav. V'yesh ba bereviot shotim enu kol kach b'nekem v'namid. Okay? V'yesh omrim sh'tzarich lishtot rov hakos afilu mahzik kama revi'iyot. The Ramban said that with Pesach, there's a din that you not only have to drink a revi'it, but you also have to drink the majority of your cup. Which means a regular, you should know, by the way, a regular plastic cup is about 106, 170. Regular small plastic cup is about 170 milliliters. I measured it once, something between, it's well over 150 milliliters. How about 170 milliliters? So, for Kiddush on Shabbat, about a third of that is sufficient. A revi'it would be about half of that. So if you've got a slightly bigger cup, even drinking less than half is absolutely fine, according to the Shulchan Aruch in the Stam. However, the Ramban said, even if you're drinking a revi'it, you still need to drink majority of the cup. Which is why you'll see some people, they have made to measure small cups, so you can drink the entire cup or the majority of the. In fact, the later poskim even came along with Kaf HaChaim writes this, that you should drink kol hakos. Even if it has lots of revi'it in it, you drink the whole cup. Okay, so the point is that meikar adin lechatechila, all you need to do is to drink 86 milliliters, regardless of how much content you have in your cup. However, what would be good practice is that you drink the majority of your cup, regardless of how big it is. You drink the majority of it. And that's the Mishnah Berurah writes, that you try to get cups which have exactly a revi'it or something like that, so you drink the whole cup. Again, this is all a discussion of what herut, what freedom is. Okay, now the Ramah says an important point, which is actually interesting why the Shulchan Aruch didn't mention it, but he agrees to it, didn't mention it here, is that you need to drink the cup in the appropriate time frame. Now, what is the appropriate time frame for drinking? So this, in Ilchot, earlier on in Shulchan Aruch, he tells us that there's two opinions on the appropriate time frame is. Some say the appropriate time frame for drinking is Kedei Achilat Pras, which is about 4.5 minutes or so. But others say no, with water it's a much smaller time frame, which is Kedei Shiur Revi'it, which is a few gulps. So certainly in the first instance, one should be drinking their cup, not sipping it. Sometimes you see people sipping the cup. Should be drinking it 1, 2, 3 gulps rather than sipping it through. You drink the revi'it like that. Yeah, good. Okay. This is the Rashba. Rashba says that if you find it difficult to have the 4 cups, you still need to make sure you drink the 4 cups. Because of the mitzvah that Chachamim established, you still have to drink it. So this is why we tell people to drink the 4 cups, even if they don't necessarily enjoy it. Not if it's gonna. I know a person who gets migraines, terrible migraines from drinking red wine specifically. Okay, so if you're gonna have that trouble, then that's something else. Says the next halacha, mitzvah lahzor ahar yain adam. This is from the Yerushalmi, that it's preferable to have red wine on Pesach night as opposed to white wine for the Arba Kosot. One reason given is because of the Midrash, which says that the Egyptians bathed in the blood of the Israelim, and so that's why, or because red wine is generally considered more important. And I think it's okay. I suppose it's preference, but I think, is red wine more expensive than white wine generally? No, Mari, you know these things. Tell us what's more of a special wine, white wine or red wine?
It's not the color.
But generally speaking, which wines are more? There's no rule nowadays.
If you're eating red meat, you gotta drink red wine.
Right.
If you're eating cheese, like very good cheeses,
You have to have white wine.
Red wine.
Oh, red wine.
If you eat fish, white wine.
Okay.
Dessert, sweet white wine, and the price doesn't depend on the color. It depends on the origin of the bottle, the year,
Right.
the name, the winery. You
Okay.
can pay 3,000 pounds for a bottle if it's a very good year, very good winery, French, you know.
Okay, that'll be a expensive Pesach for the family. But anyway, in any case, it's a mitzvah to have red wine. However, a couple of points here. As I said, if a person prefers white wine, then he has white wine. And also, there's an interesting point here about blood libels. In fact, the Keter Shem Tov of Gagin, who was the Hacham of the Spanish and Portuguese about 100 years ago, writes in his Keter Shem Tov about one of these such blood libels with regards to the baking of the matzah. He says even the police came. This was in his country before he came to England. No, I can't remember where it was. Sorry, I can't remember where it was. But these kinds of blood libels happened all the time around Pesach, and so the Mishnah Braydi writes that if there are lots of blood libels going around, then don't use red wine, use white wine. Okay, now the next halakha is important. Yotz'in beyain mevushal ubekonditon. You can fulfill the mitzvah of the arba kosot with pasteurized wine, mevushal wine, and also with sweet wine. So you'll find many people that come on Pesach, they'll tell you they want to have wine and not grape juice because they want to fulfill the halakha that you need to have non-mevushal wine for the arba kosot. Mitzvah to have arba kosot, 4 cups, and these 4 cups need to be non-mevushal. So where's this come from? The source of this is the Rambam. The Rambam says very clearly, you do not fulfill the mitzvah of arba. You do not fulfill the mitzvah of grape juice, of wine, if you're using yain mevushal. Yain mevushal no longer has the status of wine. The problem is, the Rambam says this about every kiddush. Yeah, and in fact, the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchot Kiddush 272, he brings this black and white, and he brings the Rambam. According to the Rambam, you do not yotzeh kiddush with yain mevushal. This is why the Shulchan Aruch here frames the halakha when he says yotz'in b'yain mevushal. You can fulfill the mitzvah with yain mevushal, which means that it seems to be saying that it's better to have not mevushal. Why? Because he's accommodating Harambam. In Hilchot Kiddush on Shabbat, the Shulchan Aruch brought 2 opinions, Stam and Ula Harambam. That's why he writes. He says Stam, the main halakha he writes is that you can fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush every Friday night with yain mevushal. But he says Ula Rambam, by according to Rambam, you don't fulfill the mitzvah with it. So if you're particular throughout the year, whether you should or not is something else. If you're particular throughout the year to have yain mevushal, then you need to be particular on Pesach night to do so as well. But to come along just on Pesach night and to say on Pesach night I have to have non-mevushal wine, because the Rambam, that means you don't. Why you're not doing that the whole year round? There's even an argument to say that it could be more important to do so on Friday night because their kiddush is doraita, although it's unlikely kiddush alakos is doraita, but at least there's a base of doraita, whereas arba kosot is certainly rabbinic in nature. But my point is just be consistent. Be consistent. Yeah, if you're going to have non-mevushal wine on Pesach night because of this halakha, because of the Rambam, great. That's definitely best practice. But then do that every Friday night and not just on Pesach.
Would it be consistent to have it on Friday, not on Shabbat lunch?
You could say that, yeah. I could hear that.
Thank you.
I could hear that, yeah. Yudalid, גם הנשים חייבות בארבע כוסות ובכל מצוות הנוהגות באותו הלילה. Women are equally obligated in the entire night, even though it's a positive mitzvah, which is time bound. Nonetheless, it's still obligated because either one interpretation is because the main interpretation is because because they were part of the miracle, they were part of the Exodus, and also they participated in the Exodus in the sense that they helped the Bnei Israel leave. The Midrash says, "B'zchut nashim tzidkaniyot nigalu mitzrayim," we were redeemed from Egypt because of the women. Therefore, women are equally obligated in all the mitzvot of the Seder. תינוקות תדבב, תינוקות שהגיעו לחינוך מצווה ליתן לכל אחד כוסו לפניו. We should give our children as well their own cups. If they're the age where they understand what's going on, we should give them their own cups. It's a mitzvah, it's not obligatory, it's a non-ma'akev. There's actually an opinion which that the whole, this is coming back to the point we said about the wine. There's actually an opinion which says that children normally there's a mitzvah of chinuch. So whatever we do, we should do our children do. So why would the Shulchan Aruch be writing this here? Because here, there are those who say that there's no mitzvah of chinuch here. Because the Hachamim never established the mitzvah of chinuch for children for wine, which is not something which they enjoy. Yeah? You don't do chinuch to someone. The whole mitzvah of chinuch is educating to do it, which is what? What's the mitzvah? So it depends how you look at it. So is the mitzvah to have the 4 cups, then educate the children, so they should do it as well? Is the mitzvah that they should experience herut? Kids won't experience herut by having wine, and so therefore there's no mitzvah anymore. Which is why Shulchan Aruch writes only mitzvah, but it's not ma'akev. And in fact, Chacham Ovadia writes that if it's difficult at all, anyway, it's very expensive Pesach for people. We forget, people struggle with Pesach. And if you got a big family and lots of grape juice for lots of kids, it all adds up and it all costs. It's absolutely fine for the children under Bar Mitzvah not to have their own cups, not to have, they can drink from their father's cup, from their mother's cup, and so on and so forth. Finally, Mitzvah lehalek letinokot kelot ve'gozin k'teshuru shinu v'shalu. This is from the Gemara actually. You should have treats ready for the kids so that they are alert for the entire evening, and they are rewarded when they participate. Just to bear in mind, because again you see this a lot as well, is the whole thing people do with manishtana nowadays. They make each child sing manishtana, from the eldest to the youngest, and the kids have been preparing for weeks in school, and everyone's really proud. And you got the Seder and the Bubba all there, and they're all hearing their grandchildren hear, manishtana. It's become a big thing, this manishtana thing, which is lovely. The problem is that the child says his manishtana, and then they've done it, and then they get their promise from their father or their grandfather what reward they're going to get after Pesach for the singing manishtana so beautifully, but without recognizing that manishtana is actually just a question which needs an answer. Yeah, the main part of the Haggadah, I say this every year. If you literally had in 1 minute, you had no other time. Yeah, you would say manishtana avadim hayinu and Pesach matzah maror. That's it. If you literally had, that's no other time. And in fact, our minhag, the Syrian minhag is between manishtana and avadim hayinu. The Baal Habayit says in Arabic, hada jawab. This is the answer. He makes a point of saying hada jawab. We've all asked the question now, right? Not the 4 questions. We've asked the 1 question of manish. Why is that different? Which has 4 elements. That's the question of the night. And now we've asked the question, Hada Jawab. This is the answer now, Avadim Hayinu. So it's really important that we engage the children, not just in the beautiful singing of Manishtana, but as important is the response and the answer so the child understands what this whole thing is about. Hazak everyone. So that's been a great journey since January. We've been through a lot of Hilchot Pesach. Obviously, as I said when we began, it's going to take a long time to get through everything, but we've done a good core of Pesach. Pesach Hashem will enhance our Chag. So that brings us to the end of this, and I want to thank Doron. Now you're here. I want to thank you for all the transcripts which really help, and many people have commented how it's a big help. In fact, I prepare my daily questions by looking back at them. So in any case, we're going to stop Pesach now, obviously. So that. Now I just wanted to ask everyone what would be their preference for starting in the summer term. What we should do. I'll be happy to hear from people what they want to do. But I have some thoughts, but I'll be interested to hear what people want to do. Don't forget, till a year ago, we were doing Hilchot Shabbat. We got up to Siman 302. So we could continue Shabbat, we could do Omer, we could do Rosh Hashanah, or we could even start Sukkot. Sukkot will take us long enough to get through the whole of Sukkot if we start now. There's enough material there to get through till then. So I'll be interested to hear people what their thoughts are before we end.
Abdullah, Hilchot Shabbat, Dayan Kada.
Hilchot Shabbat, Maria, thank you. Who else?
Recording stopped.
I would say even try to do all of Hilchot Pesach.
Yeah, I hear that, and I had that thought.
We're already